Well, let's get into our top story this morning. The US has led international reaction to the fall of Syria's President Bashar al-Assad, with the Secretary of State Antony Blinken saying the Syrian people finally have reason to hope. Earlier, US President Joe Biden said the sudden collapse of Assad's government was a fundamental act of justice after decades of repression. The deposed Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and his family are reported to have gone to Russia. Let's get the latest from our SABC News correspondent, Dasha Chernyshova. Dasha, give us an update as to what's been going on with regard to the former Syrian president.
Well, indeed, we have heard from the Russian Foreign Ministry on Sunday confirming that Bashar al-Assad has left the country following the negotiations with the members of the military opposition. And he has, according to Moscow, given the orders of the peaceful transition of power to the new authorities. Later in the day, we've heard 3 Russian news agencies providing an unknown Kremlin source and saying that Bashar al-Assad is actually now in Moscow along with his family, where he has been granted asylum based on humanitarian grounds. Now we understand, we have seen some of the pictures circulating the Russian social media with Assad and his wife being in Moscow, from these statements, we understand that Moscow will continue to build its relations with the new authorities in Syria. The statement suggests that there have been security guarantees provided to the Russian military bases in Syria, the airfield in Hmeimim, as well as the naval port in Tartus, and security has been granted, special security has been granted to the Russian diplomatic mission in Syria. With all that said, Russia insists that it is going to continue the dialogue, and it is all in the interest of the Syrian people. Russia says this should be political dialogue based on the resolutions and decisions made by the UN Security Council, especially Resolution 2254, and all of the movements, interstate dialogues and communication among the different opposition groups in Syria should be conducted under the auspices of the United Nations. That is the Russian position. But also we understand that Moscow is closely monitoring all the developments. It is very difficult to say how Russia is going to continue to build its ties with the new authorities of Syria, given the very fact that for years Russia has been supporting the government of Bashar al-Assad. The Russian air forces have been hitting the targets of the terrorists along with the Syrian air forces in Syria. And Moscow has all this time been saying that HTS is actually the terrorist group, listed as such by the United Nations and by the US itself. Now the Russian media are taking a very different approach. They are not talking about the military opposition taking over power in Syria. So we understand there have been calls for the UN Security Council urgent meeting that is expected to be held at Russia's request on Monday. And one of the issues that Moscow is willing to discuss is obviously the measures of support to the Syrian people, but also the territorial integrity of the country. This is something that we have been hearing, the importance of which we have been hearing and being stressed by different politicians throughout the past days. The Astana format meeting in Doha has also focused very much on the need to preserve the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Syria. So this Security Council meeting is also expected to touch on the issues of Israel, the Golden Heights, and obviously the repercussions that the power change in Syria will actually have for the region and the country itself.
All right, Dasha, thank you. Thank you for that comprehensive update on the latest that's coming out of Syria. And of course, that former president there, al-Bashar now, is President Bashar al-Assad, is in Moscow, and he's been granted asylum there with his family. But we'll continue to check in and see how that situation progresses throughout the day.